Welcome back to the Drive Collective YouTube channel and another episode of Talking Cars. We thought we'd pose a little question. It's the early 2000s, you've had to sell your Ferrari, you've got a baby on the way. You need 4 seats and 400 horsepower. What car are you going to choose? We've got 2 amazing examples to go through, the E39 M5 and the 996 Turbo. Let's find out which one's better.
You've just sold your Ferrari 355,
Yep.
you're a real driver, and you've got a newborn on the way. You need back seats, you want 400 brake, you still want to be able to keep up on those DC drives. What are you going to take? First thing I want to talk about is how different these cars are, and yet they manage to exist in a fairly similar space. NAV8, 5 litres, 4 doors, saloon body shell, rear wheel drive, locking diff, flat 6, twin turbo, all wheel drive, no locking diffs, and it's a sports car, ground up, 2-seater.
4-seater, 2 back seats.
Yeah, 2 plus 2.
Yeah, but I feel like there is that element though. So you're talking about, you got a newborn on the way. That, you could get away with a newborn on the way. If it's your second child though,
Yeah,
you're
and
over here
also,
at that point.
On the original thing, you got a newborn.
Yeah.
What's going to get you in this and what's going to get you in that? The things that separate them, I mean, obviously you pay a bit more money, you get a bit more performance, fine.
This was a £60,000 sterling, not with any spec, but let's call it base price £60,000, including all your tax.
adjusted inflation.
Adjusted
inflation for 2025, because we're in the new year. That's £120,000 in today's money. This was £150,000.
Okay.
So it's still
They're
quite
very comparable.
But you could spec this up to be nearish that. I know that's an unfair thing.
This is before, back in the day, before Porsche started optioning everything.
Yeah.
Right? So you could spec this up, but this came with a lot of things, right? It had 2 seat choices, like normal narrow base seats or these sports seats. Then you could choose, I think the biggest one was Bose and PCM at the time.
Yeah. Whereas these, well, you had to add spec to them, right? Because there are some cars out there that were, so say base price was 60, there were cars out that came out which were like 66 total. Whereas this, 78, I think, based on the spec that it has.
Did that ever...
In period, it had about 18K's worth of spec.
Can I ask, did it ever come with cloth seats?
You could order it with cloth seats, yes. A really nice sort of M-Tech cloth
Can you
seat.
imagine how rare that would be?
Yeah.
You're saying the price gulf is quite big, but actually I would somewhat disagree with you because a Tiptronic 996 Turbo, you can pick up in the 25 to 29,000 pounds. There are actually quite a few of them for sale and they're generally higher mileage. The thing with these is that they don't do as many miles as those. So like you've got E39 M5s with 150 plus K, which are sitting at the 14,000 pound mark.
You put your money where your mouth is and you went for the M5, you didn't get a Porsche. How come you wanted an M5 over something like a 996 Turbo? Well,
so the M5 came out when I was 13 or 14. One of the key moments for me was, not everyone will remember this, BMW spent a huge amount of money making the first ever viral films back in the day. So they had a different director per film. The one that featured the M5 was made by Guy Ritchie. Madonna was in it. Clive Owen was the main star across all these films. I saw that film when I was 14. I'm assuming it was 14, maybe 15, because it was a facelift car like mine is. Instantly I wanted one. And I wanted one more than any other car because it was so incredibly cool to me.
The thing is that it did actually feature a lot in popular culture, right, around that time. And it was quite heavily loved by a lot of the critics as well. Did you ever consider a Porsche?
I did consider a Porsche, but a 996 Turbo, for example, is not in the same price bracket or price point. A 996 would be. Whereas this car is broadly, when I was buying a car, 20K was the top end. The cheapest cars were down around £12,000, let's say. And they're kind of in around the same place now, depending on mileage and condition and those elements.
It was a ridiculous car when it came out, right?
But from factory, when these cars were new, they're basically the quickest things you could get with 4 wheels from a mainstream manufacturer.
Absolutely.
That you could daily, you could warranty, you didn't need to tune them.
If you were to think about its competitors, the E55, I think it's W204, was it?
210.
210.
Yeah.
W210.
With a dial lights, the circle lights.
And that was around the 350, 360.
Yeah, it wasn't even the same league.
Did Audi even make, they made the S6, but they didn't make an RS6?
They did do an RS6.
Okay, fine.
RS6 came later and it was wagon only.
Yeah.
It wasn't a saloon.
It was also auto only.
Yes,
sorry, no, it was saloon, you're right, sorry.
But you're right, it's automatic. And also the E55 was automatic as well, right? And you had like other variants like E60 and what have you. But this just had no competitor. It just absolutely demolished everything. It was the best super saloon that you could get. If you were, like our original question posed, you needing good 4 seats, because obviously this does have 4 seats, but trying to cram into the back of it.
Well, if you've got a newborn up to about 6 years old, these both fulfill the same
Absolutely.
But it was also what was considered to be the last over-engineered BMW in period, that's what, writers were right about.
Yeah.
Even when the E60 came out to replace the E39, not M5 specifically, but the E39 as a platform overall, they still considered that the E39 barely needed replacing. It led its class till it got replaced.
I mean, if you think about every single M5 generation that's come out, so we started E28, E34, E39, E60, and the F series, which I guess I'm
took
less
it in a
inclined.
different direction because they went turbocharged.
But out of all the M5s, because I was just having a look at what people wrote about each M5, this categorically, all writers, Car and Driver, Auto Express at the time, Car Magazine, I think Evo came a few years after this. Everyone said it was one of the greatest cars that you could buy. In comparison, the E34 M5, the one that now I think is very popularized, like Greg James did that video with
yeah, he bought one.
and he's actually got one. But they were somewhat criticised in period, whilst this was loved.
But I don't think you buy an E34 M5 now to try and get a driving experience. I think you buy one because of how they look. They're still decent to drive, but E34 as a whole is a very iconic car. It's got huge place in pop culture. It was kind of, not the M5 specifically, but it was the OG kind of bad boy saloon.
Yeah.
Whereas the E39 has a much smarter appearance to it. It's a bit more sophisticated. I think when I see these, I imagine like Office Box was, when it's an E34 for so long, they had this real bad boy street car kind of image, So I think they have completely different placements now, and you almost don't cross shop them. You might do if you're a B&O collector, but people still buy these for their actual performance and technical prowess and the driving experience.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting. And same with these.
Yeah.
You still buy them because they're brilliant to drive, and they really are. They're absolutely amazing cars.
E39 M5 was loved, and it still is, like, absolutely
By
loved.
far the most popular M5 generation.
100%.
In popular culture,
But by far the least popular turbo version, 996 Turbo.
Well, I would say 996 overall is the least popular for Carreras, in my opinion, but also I feel like to some extent in popular culture, this is one of the most iconic turbos ever. I think G-body and this and 964 because they're bad boys.
Yeah.
But 964, I don't know, but most people, they weren't that popular when they're being sold.
And there were so few.
It was really the movie stuff.
Yeah.
But these, I feel like these had such a strong place in popular culture. It was one of the it cars when it was new. And so is this, obviously. Whereas the Carrera was seen as,
a bit ugly, a bit over, like with the egg, they call it fried egg headlights.
Yeah, like to some people. But this somehow, it completely escaped that. I feel like it's a different car.
I mean, this is a car I've always loved and always wanted to own. I have a Targa at Gen 2. You used to have a Carrera Gen 1. But I remember when my dad took me to the showroom to see the 996, the Gen 2s, and this was there. This just looked like it could conquer the world.
Yeah.
It could just take anything and do anything. And it's a testament to the car because actually, again, in period, one of the magazines that we all respect, Evo, for their E-Cotty, I think it was the second time in the 2000s, this walked away with the victory. And like you compare it to a Ferrari 360, which the natural comparison is, that came in 7th or 8th. I mean, yeah, it had the F1 gearbox and this had this silly donkey Tiptronic, which a lot of these are spec'd in, but the manual change on this car is so organic and the feel that you get going through the gears.
I'm assuming though that the reason lots of them are Tiptronic is because this was seen as a daily drivable car.
Yeah, which,
right?
there
were people who lived in this city that we live in now in London who would have bought this. They wanted fantastic performance, but at the same time, they wanted it to be usable every day. They didn't want a manual shift box.
Majority of people, I think, spec the Tiptronic, one, because it was ease of use, but I do also think it was quite current technology at that time. They were starting to do the single clutch gearboxes in Ferraris. As most people can attest to, the 355 was a horrible F1 gearbox. Porsche went with the Mercedes box, right? And it is essentially an automatic box. But you can shift it on the steering wheel. I just don't think it gives you the same feel as this
It's
manual.
nowhere near like a manual, because it doesn't, with a manual you have complete control and you think, oh, I need to downshift this corner, so you downshift. Whereas this, you think, I'm going to need to downshift the corner, so you downshift, and then by the time you reach the corner, you have to plan ahead. And if you have to plan ahead, it's a different proposition.
Going back to the M5, and just a quick question. Do you feel that car is quite rowdy?
So personally, when I'm driving it, I think it's capable of being a thug, but I don't think outwardly it is. I cruised across town today in mostly commuting style traffic, and it was perfectly sedate, perfectly relaxed, perfectly insulated from the world. I think, yes, you can modify them. So for example, even just the simplicity of putting some form of performance exhaust completely changes the character of the car.
Yeah.
It unleashes a huge amount more noise out the back and it turns it into a thuggish car. But then equally, specification can denote that as well, I think. But that applies to all cars, right?
Yeah.
You put one of these in Imola red with some loud seats and a big exhaust on the back.
Yeah.
it will look like a thuggish car,
Yeah.
and it will feel and drive more like a thuggish car
Whilst this,
somehow.
even though it has rip your face off performance, which it really does, especially when the turbo kicks in, but because of the four-wheel drive system, you actually feel like you can take a corner a lot faster.
Yeah.
When I was driving the M5, it was a bit damp, and I did feel it was a bit more skittish.
I think these are on the verge of being a total thug, and it takes just a few modifications, because when I drove our friend Moorham's and I was driving it back, joining a motorway, I was being completely sensible, but I still had traction control off from when I started the journey. I had to join the motorway, and I did like a 3/4 throttle, 3/4 revs, second to third pull, and when I got into third, it started spinning up, and I had completely unintentionally, I had half a ton of lock on joining a slip road, and I thought, oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah.
And I caught it back because they're a lovely chassis and they're really easy, and the steering, I do think the steering is a little bit slow, fast road, but stuff like that, it makes it really nice and easy to catch.
Yeah, it does.
And then I quickly put traction control back on, and I just stuck at the speed limit the whole way. And I was just like,
You put traction control. That car
was just
actually
like-
did. I mean, a car to scare him is a proper thug car.
but you know what it is? The reason why it did that, because it was a fairly normal gear change. It's not like I was power shifting
It
or
is,
something.
yeah.
You've got a 5-litre engine, and there's a lot of engine. There's a huge amount of reciprocating weight, rotational weight in the engine from the big crank, big pistons, 8 of them, there's a big heavy flywheel. So if you don't get your throttle and clutch exactly right on the gear change, it's like you've got like a really heavy spinning disc against a really light spinning disc, and it just dominates through, and you get all this driveline shunt. And it's not a criticism of the car, but it's this feeling of you've got a thug that's wanting to burst out, and you've got enough of a veneer of sophistication.
I mean, you do actually have wood veneer in that car.
Yeah. But it's also, I feel like with this car, and I think from when you drove it, you pointed out as well, you really have to you have to learn the car to an extent. You can get in and drive it, and you can drive it quickly, but to learn how to drive it really quickly, you kind of have to learn it, because you're also having to load it up before getting into the corner. Like you say, because of the limitations of the steering. Because, for example, because of the size of the engine, the physical size of the engine, they couldn't use the same steering that they'd use in their 6-cylinder cars. The steering's fantastic. The steering's really direct on the 6-cylinder cars.
Yeah.
Some of the best thing that BMW ever did.
But it's also worth remembering that this wasn't designed as a track performance car by any stretch. It's quite capable on track, but it's not a track performance car. It still weighs 1,800 kilos. It was a barnstormer, the same as this can be a barnstormer as well.
Well, here's the thing, right? So out the box, this isn't something that's going to rip your face off, and like, you can make it, you can turn the dial up.
No, but we have to talk about context here, because when this was new, this was incredibly quick.
Okay.
And the issue with...
It's relative position.
I mean,
exactly, and
we
the
all
issue
know
that the E39 has is that it's held in high regard predominantly because it was such a competent car, but competency doesn't age well, because competency, the barrier gets higher and higher and higher as cars get newer.
Of course, yeah.
So now when you look at it, you have to look at it from other perspectives, like the classic, the looks, the noise, and if you focus purely on driving dynamics, I think you will be underwhelmed. Because BMW M, much like Porsche, have a relentless ability to just progress and progress and progress.
I agree to a certain extent, but I think where Porsche have really upped the game that much more, I think the news, is it a G70 M5, the new
G90.
one?
G90.
Well, no, the new one, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I watched the Chris Harrison.
That's a different car. That's not
but like, you know, I think they've just, that's why I think people are turning back to cars like this, because they're held in such high regard.
Yeah, but the M5 back catalogue before then is pretty incredible. I think what's interesting is you've almost got two different types of M5. You've got very sharp supercar like M5s, which I would say the E28, E34 and the E60, very high revving, very precise, and seen in their day as being able to compete on par with sports cars in slim car body. And then you've got the more muscle car type M5s, which is this and the F10 and the G90.
And the G90.
No, F90.
F90. Yeah. Because that came in the CS version as well, right?
Yes.
That's a lovely car.
I've not driven one of those, but this and the F10, I think, share this real incredible character of being super torquey. Like I said, a barnstormer, they're quite brutish in a really nice way, in a really appealing way. Whereas the E60, it's a different car to this. And I think the E28 as well, they're cars that thrive on revs, and they're very precise, and they're very delicate in the way you've got to drive them. And this is quite brutish compared to Carrera. The Carrera, you have to drive on your tiptoes, feel everything.
It's like a ballet
you can kind of bully it around.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. They actually share quite a lot of
I actually,
driving characteristics.
having driven a turbo, okay, I'm saying relative to the 997 that followed it, it's quite a raw driving experience, I find. So as much as it feels really stable to get round the corner, it still also feels quite brutish. You can feel the back end squatting as you're putting power into it.
You can feel what all the diffs are doing.
You can feel
where
everything.
the power's going.
Where a 997, you don't really get that. The 997 is quite an outright speed car, and it pulls relentlessly, but you don't get much feedback from it,
Very
or I've
muted.
felt.
Very muted,
This came out of the box at 420 horsepower. That was 390. Then you had the X50 package, which again, our good friend Mo had an X50, beautiful cobalt blue 996 X50, which bumped up the power to 450.
Correct.
And I think that was really it. It was a power upgrade.
Yeah, because they then brought out the Turbo S, which effectively was an X50 package with ceramics.
Ceramic brakes, exactly.
And it was a very limited
It
run
was a
model.
song. It came out, it had a brilliant green colour to it. When I saw it on the NEC show in Birmingham.
2003,
yeah, and we were invited by Porsche to come and have a look at that car. Still to this day, love this car. This is a car I would love to get and just be like, I've made it in life. And I think when you drive it, you know, the E39 M5, you could be quite subtle about it, and you could kind of get by in traffic, especially in a black or silver one, or your one, which is beautiful, and an Oxford green metallic.
Most people don't notice this car.
Which is quite nice.
Flies under the radar.
I think this flies under the radar somewhat. Whenever I do a double take on these. Any turbo I see, double take. The wide arches, the air inlets, like, Jesus, it's so muscular.
I think the difference with a Porsche or any Porsche 911 is that everyone will be able to point at that and go, oh, that's a Porsche 911. And they know that it's a high performance car, regardless of whether it's a turbo or not. They still consider it a high performance car. The general public I'm talking about. Whereas these, 99% of people are just driving an old BMW. It doesn't mean anything or matter.
I think the 906 was the most dramatic turbo conversion out of all of the generations. In terms of Carrera versus turbo, pure on looks, I think the 996 Turbo is like insanely more dramatic and insanely more transformed than the base Carrera. I say that even with the G-body, even the 964, maybe 964, that was pretty dramatic as well.
Yeah.
But the 930 that you could get at the Super Sport, the rear wing.
Yeah, and you could also
do a
wide arch, like you could get a wide arch on a 3.2, a normal 3.2.
But these, when I drove one of these, I had a Carrera at the time, and I pulled up next to it, and I looked at that, and I thought, that is literally just a different car. And when you're driving it, and you see, you know, when you're following like an SUV or a van, it's clean, and you can see the reflection. And I remember following a van in this, and I could see the reflection, and the two xenon lights piercing through, because xenons are quite rare on base 996s, but they all came on the turbos, all came with them. And you see the scoops and the rear hips, and that super deep front spoiler, which actually is almost a little bit ugly, but it still pulls it off. It's insane, the presence it has. And then you've got the rear lights, which are different to the normal one.
For me, the 996 Turbo is one that you could travel from London to Switzerland without even thinking. You'd be comfortable on all types of motorways, whatever the speed, and it will get you there. And you feel like you've, had a drive, but you wouldn't feel necessarily so exhausted after driving it. You could then take it on the Grimsel Pass, Fruka Pass.
Yeah, you could also then take it up the Alps for your skiing holiday.
And it would be fun. You could put roof racks on it, you could put skis on it, you could take the little one in the car.
But does that not apply to both of these?
I think my experience with the E39 M5 is you have to ring this out a little bit more to get it a bit more leery.
Really? I think these are absolute torque monsters, and they don't actually reward you revving them out. That was my biggest surprise, which is also why I think this is a bit of an outlier when it comes to M cars. I don't think it drives or feels like an M car, which isn't a bad thing, but I think it feels like this really muscular torque monster. It's a bit more of a muscle car. Most of the power is in that mid-range.
This feels like it's got 500 plus.
But these, I'm sorry, these did not come out of 420 horsepower. I know they said that.
Yeah.
I reckon you dyno one of these, it'll be put out 435, 440 minimum.
Yeah. Tony was saying at the wheels right now, this is doing 420.
There's also an element of the seating position.
Yeah.
The fact that you're down low, you're hunkered, that the experience you get with that, you'll feel like you're moving faster because your arse is that much.
You can slam
that.
the
And the turbo
Sorry,
as well.
excuse my French.
Yeah, you can slam that seat right to the floor.
Yeah.
Pedals, for me, perfectly set up. Slight deviation towards the left-hand side. Pedal box, the between the clutch, the brake and accelerator, very small distances, but easy to heel and toe.
Yeah. But I think the primary controls in both these are really good. They both have, in my opinion, actually quite poor seats. They both sit you too high. These seats, they feel like the E47 380 seats, which sit you too high.
Yeah.
Not sports enough. I'll say the exact same thing about these. They sit you way too high.
I mean, even the sports seats.
Yeah, for sure, because sports seat base is the same. So the thing to do in these is to put 997 seats in. Both these cars are the same kind of foibles. I think the pedals are amazing, really easy to heel and toe. You lose steering feel in the turbo. These are pretty good for an all-wheel drive, but if you come out of a Carrera, like I did, and get into this, the steering feel's dead. This hasn't got much steering feel at all. But BMW have always struggled with steering feel. Always. The CSL and the 6-point E39 were decent, but all of their M cars have always had quite crap steering feel. Great cars overall. You drive them on the chassis, you drive them on the rear axle, but you don't drive it through the rich kind of seam of feedback you get through the steering. But the fact is, if you want to drive, if you're a keen driver, you're gonna have a good time in either one of these. But they're different recipes. If you want to go really quickly, you need 4 seats. You haven't got a huge amount of other places to go.
No, you don't.
And that's why the price doesn't really matter. Because if you've got 100K to spend, you are gonna cross-shop these. What style do you like? Do you want a subtle 4-door that is actually gonna rip your face off if you need to? Or do you want all bells and whistles, supercar slaying Porsche, which for what it is a subtle, but you drive this down the high street, it's still gonna get noticed. That kind of element of like, who do you want to be, how do you want to portray yourself, that's what's gonna split these cars. Not owned an M5, but I've owned a lot of E39s. Chassis-wise, the M5 shares a lot with the 540, like really, really, really close. You're missing the diff, and I think we deduced that there was a spring rate change. But more or less, like, and E39 540 chassis, and by extension this, is one of the most well-sorted rear-wheel drive chassis ever. So if you can get past that small nub of learning basic oversteer, I think these are, like, it doesn't mean you have to slide it, but if you're comfortable with the idea that, okay, if I go into this corner, a 10% chance that I might go, then it's so controllable. Whereas when people criticize the M4 and the F80 M3 for being like, you know, a bit snappy, I always think, well, okay, I get that. I do understand it, because you do really have to be on it. Whereas these are so friendly, and I think you can drive this just safely as you can that. Not as quickly, fine, but you can, I guess the point I'm trying to say is you can really enjoy this on the road in a safe manner and engage with it.
The thing is that modern cars don't really have the same foibles that both of these do. And I actually think that, yes, mechanically they do have foibles, and, you know, from a styling point of view, they have interesting quirks. But the cool thing is about in both of these cars is that inside, it feels like a really special place to be. Like, I love how, like, the 996 has, you know, the dial to switch on the lights on the side. You know, steering is always on the left, or well, it's always on the right, sorry. It's always on the right, steering is on the right. Key. And then just like the 5 dials in front of you.
5 dials are so good.
And then when it goes up to 200, you're like, oh.
And on the pre-facelift, on the 0.1, the speedo is in the rev gauge, I'm pretty sure, because it is on the 0.1 Carreras. So, whereas on the 0.2, they moved it to the left in the speedo, sorry, the digital readout.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so where it says the miles per hour.
When the digital readout is in the rev counter, I think that's one of the all-time best dashboards. I love it. It's so good. And you watch that center-mounted rev gauge fling round at night with the orange back glow of it. It's so good. But the interior quality is really nice. There is that element of being like, you're kind of caught between eras, and I do really like it. You could argue it's dated. I would argue that it's
relative, particularly to a 997, I would say. So.
I mean, compared to this is one of the all-time great interiors ever, and it's set the template for modern BMWs.
He's got a phone in his car, so he wins.
So you can get a phone in these.
I know, but he's got an actual phone in his car.
The phone integration is way better, but the whole dash design is so beautiful. It really is. And then you've got the classic huge bagel steering wheel that BMW insists on giving their M cars.
I don't know why they did that for all the M cars. Like, even CSL, like, one of the
I think there's some Freudian phallic stuff there.
Yeah,
honestly, I think it's
the steering wheel in this,
beautifully thin.
Oh god,
and not padded at all.
No, I know.
So all the feel that does come through the front wheels, you actually get to it. Whereas there, not only have you got the resetting sport steering, which by the time you get any mileage through it, you lose whatever feel comes through. But then it's even more numbed by that thick padded steering wheel.
I mean, so the other things that I do love about that particular interior is that you've got the headlights on the side, and it just feels...
Headlight switch on the side. No, but
then you've got one on the other side as well, right?
But it's the overall quality of it.
Yes.
So this car's done over 120,000 miles now, and I've got one rattle, which is my, what's it called? The glove box. But glove box has got a tiny rattle. The rest of the car, there's nothing.
Okay, so the thing, when I first drove an E39, the thing is, when I closed the door to that car, it felt like I was closing the door to a bank vault. It just, the thud in it. Yes,
you shut out the outside world.
Yeah, yours has double glazing. Okay, fine.
Double glazed as well,
which does change it categorically because of noise point of view. Yeah. But it's just something about inside, you feel inside of it. So safety is one of the most important things for me if I'm taking my kid, right? And I guess that is where this maybe has a downfall, because if it,
well, they both got side airbag, side impact protection.
Yeah.
but rear impact, you're going to have a real problem in that.
I guess.
Yeah, but then this, when you put your child in and you just want them to feel safe, they feel safe. I feel like we're in a safe car in that. Because remember, we were talking about me borrowing it for a couple of weekends just to go up to the country.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I would feel so safe. Does it have ISOFIX?
No, later cars did.
But can you fit it?
You could fit ISOFIX, and then later cars had it as standard, I think from 2001.
Fine.
ISOFIX
You can
standard.
retrofit ISOFIX in these as well.
Yeah.
But there is something about that quality Germanic feel that you get from that car that I do think you get in like a W124 Mercedes, Mark 5 Golf as well, R2. Got one of those.
But the other thing is, in terms of tech, again, this came out in what, 98 or 99?
Yeah, 99.
99.
So
Yeah.
1999, and you had illuminated gear knob, which was huge through fibre optic cables.
Yeah.
You had the light up warm up lights, which was, that might be normal now, but back in the day that was huge.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, you had these warm up lights that told you when the engine was ready
When
to
you
be
could
revved
use
up.
the power
It was
bank.
way too
Yeah.
early, but
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, of course,
It was done
yeah.
on water temp, not oil temp.
Yep.
Yeah, the oil temperature gauge, that was like illuminated, that beautiful yellowy orange glow, not the normal orange glow, but it was more yellowy. And I think the whole car would have looked so futuristic in its day. When I remember when this was new, it seems so relevant now, but when this was new, they kept on advertising it based on the technology, based on the interior tech, based on the fact this had the most, I think it was the most powerful ECU of any car when it was new. And it was like, people are asked like same amount of computing power as a NASA space shuttle or something.
To conclude, our original question that we posed to the viewers, and which you posed to both of us as well, and we discussed in quite length. You need 4 seats, 400 horsepower, and you want a car to come on like a Drive Collective drive and something to enjoy, an all-rounder. What would you take?
Where my life is now, this fits into my life perfectly. I can go out in this of a weekend in the morning, meet you guys for a drive, go for a coffee, do whatever we're gonna do. And then by the time it gets to lunch, I can take my mum and dad out. I could never get my mum and dad into one of those.
Yeah, you break
So,
the hip.
I appreciate I'm not quite answering the having a child and needing the car with an extra seat when I've had to sell my Ferrari. But for fitting into life, but also having fun, this, hands down. This works for me. To me, a Porsche, based on my life, is a second car, rather than being able to be one car to do everything.
But for me, this is the ultimate all-rounder, okay? So it's a car I lust after. So it's a one that you can park in a parking lot. I'd turn around and I'd still look at it, and it would never ever wipe the smile off my face, just because from a styling point of view, it is, in my opinion, drop dead gorgeous. Yeah. On top of that, it does everything I need it to do, right? It has the 4 seats, so I could fold the rear seats down. I could take it to the dump if I wanted to. I could take my kid in the back of the car and he would have a great time, because, you know, that turbo whoosh, that power, like, I mean, he's a bit young, but I'm hoping that he's gonna love all of those things. My wife would enjoy it as well, and she wouldn't be scared of driving this car. So she drives my 996. She's not terrified of driving that car. See herself, she hates driving it. And the final thing for me is that, because what we are, Drive Collective, we like to drive, we like to enjoy our cars. I agree with you to a certain extent that this maybe gives you a little bit more rewards for pushing it. But for my driving style and the way I drive, which is 7/10 on the road, on track, I think I would find its limitations and it would annoy me. But on the road, it would take everything that I would want it to be, and do it in such a way that would make me enjoy it so much more. So for me, I'm taking the 996 Turbo.
If I was buying new back in 2000s, when both these cars were available, I would take the M5. If I was buying today, 2025, I'll be honest, this wouldn't even get a look in for me. I think they're lovely cars, but the 996 Turbo, now, the way it's matured, I just think it's just it. I just love it. As an object, as a car, as a driving experience, I think they're so cool, so exciting, so beautiful, very usable. I've been lucky enough to have experienced the baby versions of both these. I had a 996 Carrera and had a 540i manual. So I was able to experience like the general kind of usability in cabin, etc. And they both had the pros and cons. The 540 was more usable, but I managed to get adults in the back of mine, not for very long, but you know, it's not ideal. If I had anyone with any kind of, like, maybe they're a little bit older or mobility, just whatever, they're fine. The crucial difference was, you know, you're splitting hairs on B roads, but round town when you use a car most of the time, I'd rather been in the Carrera than the E39. It just felt so special around town. Fact is, if you live in London, yeah, fine, if you could do a B-Road Blast once a week, you're still driving your car the other 3, 4, 5 days of the week, right? And the amount of time you spend in a Carrera or a 911 of any kind, the way the A-pillars are, the way the windscreen is, the way the whole car just kind of wraps tightly around you, the way it looks in a shop window reflection with that silhouette, can't beat it.
So look, get in the comments, let us know what you think. Tell us what you want to see in the future. We're always open to suggestions, and I hope you enjoy this video and tune in for more next time.
Thanks, everyone.